Good morning. Good morning. Come on in. I'm inviting you all to come on in. Going to give you just a few minutes here to join us. I'm excited about our conversation today. It is something that we all need to know, no matter what age you are in life, your journey. It is important that you learn and know these steps. It is all a part of life. Come on in and join us. I'm excited to have you join us this morning. Yes, join us. Amen. Amen. Yes. Just come on in on this beautiful sunny day. Yes. Well, we're right at 10 o'clock, and I know people will be joining us as we go along. So just let me welcome everybody. Well, good morning again to you, and my name is Decorius Vines, and I am the host for our session today, Destiny Colloquy. Destiny Colloquy, in case you don't know, is about real, active, live conversation. Active conversation. So then what does that mean? You get to put your questions in the chat. And if we have time, we will answer those questions. And if we don't get to answer them, we will go back to our video and we will respond back to you that way. So I encourage you, as always, to share with your family and your friends, and also to let us know where you're watching from. I am excited today to have as my special guest, Renee Summers. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about Renee. Renee Summers is a proficiency coach. She helps to facilitate learners in acquiring knowledge, skill, and know-hows in an effective and engaging way. Life experiences have taught her vital lessons that have set her on a mission to educate, to equip, and mentor parents, present and future, grandparents, on how to leave a legacy for their children, their grandchildren, and their loved ones. Renee has developed a strategic and easy to follow plan that includes creating wealth, creating additional income, and making wise investments, improving health, and estate planning on how to leave those last wishes to your family and a final goodbye without the risk of losing their inheritance, leaving a legacy, and not a bill. Leaving a legacy and not a bill. During the pandemic of 2020, Renee founded Grants for Growth. She has established a community where grandparents can create a safe place to support their grandchildren. Now, SAFE stands for, the S stands for spirituality, the A for academically, the F for financially, and the E for emotionally. Now, let me just say this. Today, as I said, our topic is leave a legacy and not a bill. Now, establishing an estate with directives is one of the most important things that you and I should do. We should do this to protect ourselves and also to protect our loved ones. And, and especially if you have minor children. So when planning an estate plan, there's much to think about beforehand, before even going to a person who is going to help you with your estate, your will, your trust. And these are some of the things that you should really think about beforehand. For instance, how much money do you want to pass on? Who do you want to handle your assets? Who do you want to leave that financial control to, such as a power of attorney? Should you even have a will or trust? If so, what type? How important is it to have an estate plan or a will? Things do change in life. How often should we update our wills, our trusts? These are important things that we should be concerned about, and we should ask the questions, not just those questions, but more than that. But these are just a few. Now, Renee is going to get into it and delve into it and give you the important factors and everything that she needs to do this. So I'm going to turn this over to her and allow her to do her part and just getting right in, giving you all that important information that you need. Renee, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. All right, let's see. Are we ready to go here? Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's an honor and a privilege to do this for Miss Vines. I am very close to her niece, LaShawn Williamson, who I love dearly. So LaShawn told me my auntie wants to reach out to you. I said I would love to do this for her. Let me kind of tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Renee Summers. I am what I call a Southern country girl. Grew up in North Carolina, Greensboro, North Carolina, as a matter of fact. Was the youngest of 4 children. Love my mom and dad. We were, just regular country folks and grew up, very Southern. Well, one thing I loved about my mom and dad, which I did not realize, is that, sometimes being simple is not a bad thing, but they were very simple people. So, it was go to work, put a little money in the bank if you can, pay your bills, do that. If you got a house, sometimes we, my husband and we're on 3rd time we've moved into another home, but my parents, they stayed in the same house until they paid that house off. That's how they were, stay there. You got a house, you stay there, you take care of it until it's done. That was not a bad thing at all for some people. Some people do, some people don't. It's a wonderful thing now, because one thing somebody asked me recently, they said, how did you learn what you do now? And they said, did you take classes? And I said, well, I'll be honest. I have did some studies. I've learned more skill set better, but the majority of what I'm going to talk about today has been personal. I've done it. So it's not something that I'm just saying, it's something that I've done. I've been through this, and I've really learned through trial and error. So in my trial and error, I've learned to perfect it to where that I've got it now where I really understand it, because I'm doing it over and over and over for my families. But let me tell you a little bit where I'm going with this. One of the things that my mother and father did, like I said, these are 2 people. As a matter of fact, my dad only probably had, I think he told me he went through the 10th grade. My mom she just did finish high school. So we're not talking about, overly educated people. But what they did was this. I remember them taking into the room. I took very good care of my parents. And I remember them taking to the room one day, and they had this little file cabinet. It was a little fireproof file cabinet. And they said, we want you to see these things. They said, so you'll know what's going on. And I said, great, no problem. So they said, here is a lot of our documents that you should have. And I remember looking at it. And like I said, these were two little people that were not considered as well educated. They had in there copies of information and materials that they need. They said, here's the things that you'll probably need in case we get really sick or when we die. I said, okay, not a problem. And one thing they had in there was they had a will. And I remember thinking, wow, they actually got a will. You know, like I said, that's what they knew. What they did not understand a lot of things about the will, they didn't understand exactly, you know, they knew that they wanted me over the will. And the person that had did the will for them at that time, they told them, they said, well, this is what you need to do. Choose who you want over your will. So they did, and then it was myself. And so at that time, I didn't know, you know, but then I did. So I looked at it and I read it and I said, okay, I'll honor everything you say. Well, then, now let me tell you how life progressed. Several things happened, and I'll tell you as I begin to venture you through. You'll see what I named this is Grants for Growth. The reason why is I'm big on, you know, everybody needs to know moms, dads, uncles, aunts, cousins, everybody. But I'm big on grandparents leaving an inheritance. So I came up with Grants for Growth. That is my logo. So when you see that logo, it's saying Renee. So in here, we're going to talk a little bit today about the last wishes. What are your last wishes? Do you want to leave a legacy for your children, grandchildren? Okay. Understanding wills is what we're going to talk a little bit about today. POA stands for power of attorney. Probate. We hear about probate, but do we understand the steps to probate? Trust. We've heard of trust. You know, you're thinking, well, who needs a trust? You need to define that. Is it right for me? Yes or no? Life insurance. Hey, we hear about life insurance, and you know what? Sometimes with life insurance, we get it when, you know, we're 80 or 70. Well, that really isn't when you're supposed to get your life insurance. You're supposed to get it when you're younger. But if you get it when you're 70 or 80, that's okay. And you might say, why is that? What usually happens? Ask yourself for a moment. What usually happens as you get older? Your body changes, right? Your health changes. So when you start putting in those factors and trying to get life insurance, those factors can work against you. Whereas if you were, you know, like my children right now, 30, my son's 30, my daughter's 32, well, just turned 33. She just turned 33. So 30 and 33 compared to 60 and 63. That makes a difference. Okay. So anyhow, we're going to talk a little bit about that. So, and as you see here, please, if you would notate, and in here, I got this is my email. So after this, if you want to email me, I'm going to instruct you again, but my email is Gramps, GRAMPS, 4, the number 4, growth, GROWTH, and the word safe, SAFE. As she told you, stands for spiritually, academically, financially, emotionally, at gmail.com. So let's go ahead and let's start talking about some things. Now, I want you to ask yourself, how well do you know estate planning? What makes up an estate? That's a good question, right? You think of estate, you might think, oh, that's somebody who owns 100 acres of land. No, an estate is the house you live in. That's an estate. You ever drove by sometimes and seen a sign in the yard and they'll say estate sale and it'll just be a regular house? That's probably, not telling you exactly, the reason why that sign is in that yard is probably because that person died and didn't have a will. So now the people that may have been, you know, the family members or whatever, are having to sell off whatever they can to try to get money. Okay, that's a lot of reason why you see those signs in your say estate sale. Now, it could be that somebody else who got the house, it was grandma's house, they don't want it anymore, so they're selling off everything, grandma's furniture and all that stuff. That's a lot of times why you see those signs in the yard that says estate sale. So just your house is an estate. Who needs estate planning? Who needs it? You might say, I don't own a house. Okay, but do you own anything? Do you own a car? Do you have money in the bank? Anything like that? Ask yourself, do you have a will? Do you have a will? What is probate? What is probate? I've heard probate, but what is it? Is probate a concern only for those with large estates? Do you only hear about probates if they have a large estate? That's a question. Do you know the difference in a living will and a last will and testament? There is a difference. What happens if I die without a will? It happens every day. True or false? I want to see if somebody can answer this. You must have an average of $75,000 estate to set up a legal will. Do you have to have an estate of at least approximately $75,000 to set up a legal will? Ask yourself, yes or no? True or false? Anybody want to take a stab at that? I will tell you, the answer is, guess what? False. Let's talk a little bit about documents you need to have. You know, there are things that we need to know that we need to have at all times. Ready. You remember me talking a moment ago about my mom and dad? They had a fireproof file cabinet. Now, those things are not big. They're you can get them at Lowe's Hardware, any type of, you probably can get them at your Walmarts, Home Depots, anywhere like that. Tell them you need a fireproof file cabinet. I'm not talking about the big heavy ones that people get that are like almost like a safe. You don't need nothing that heavy necessarily, because you can get the type my parents had, were the type that if the fire was to take place, if a fire took place, it would have so much, if you read them, they'll tell you how much fire extension time you have for that to burn. Okay. Then if you want it, because the reason I like the standard ones with the little handles is if it happens a fire and you are able to actually pick it up and take it out the house with you. If you didn't and you had to get to safety, it will last through the fire until the fire extinguishers are out. Okay, so in that case, a fireproof file cabinet is very important. Now, you might say, what documents need to go in there? We're going to talk a little bit about that. One thing you need to have in that fireproof file cabinet is a life insurance policy. Always keep your life insurance policy in your, guess where? There, in your document, in your fireproof file cabinet. Your marriage license, very important document to have all the time, because when a spouse dies and you have to, the other spouse, if they're on Social Security, you're only going to receive, if it was the husband and wife, they're only going to receive one check once the other spouse dies, and that is the larger check. So if the man's check, the husband's was, let's just say $1,400 a month, and the wife was $2,000, you know, as I said, the wife was more, but the wife was $2,000, then that, if that husband dies, he's going to, first, the wife's going to just keep her $2,000 check. But if the wife dies first, the husband's only going to have her $2,000 check. The government will not allow you to have both checks. To have both checks. So you got to remember that. Now, Birth certificate, very important. A lot of times, some of the documents that the state will ask you for is a copy of your birth certificate. And you might say, well, you know, my mom is 95. She needs a copy of her birth certificate. Death certificate. If one of the other spouses have already died, then you need to keep a copy of their death certificate. There are times where you might be trying to do something with the estate, and they're going to ask for a copy of the death certificate at the time of probate. They will ask for that. Okay? Now, prioritization. These are the things you need to make sure you prioritize. Make sure you have a life insurance policy. Now, there are a lot of other things you need to have, but that's one thing you need to have is make sure you have a life insurance policy. Make sure you have a will and living will. I'm going to get in there and tell you the difference, but you need to make sure you have both. The will and living will also needs to be in the fireproof file cabinet. You see, I put funeral planning. You might think, why would I want to do that? It's important. When a person dies, it's important to know that my mother or my father wanted a certain songs to be sang at their funeral. It's important to know that they had a burial plot and where it's located. It's important to know if those things are paid for. It's important to know exactly all the things, if they want a particular funeral home to handle their body. Those things are important. Funeral planning needs to be documented as well in your fireproof file section, because it helps those that are grieving to have things in order. They're already grieving, so if the more orderly things are, the better. Not going to take away the loss, what a person's feeling, but it helps them at least not to have a lot of chaos where they already heard it, they're already grieving. Now they got to find all these documents and throw papers all around. Next, documentation. Who is appointed as your durable power of attorney? You need to know. Who is appointed as your healthcare power of attorney? You need to know. Make 100% sure someone knows this. You know, we live in a society now where, you know, we do everything online. So because of that, now you probably pay your bills online. You probably have your bank statements online. You probably have, you know, even might have where you reach out to your insurance companies online. Somebody needs to know what your Apple ID, bank ID, account logins, and passwords are. In the case that person, God forbid, but they was to have immediate illness, a stroke, or heart attack, or whatever it may be. And at the moment, you don't know, they can't tell you these things. If they had that written down in a fireproof file cabinet and you had to continue helping them to pay their bills monthly until their health was better, you could go in that file cabinet and at least say, okay, let me log in and go in here and pay the bills. Because if you have a durable power of attorney, it's not going to be hard either, because you'll have access to be able to go in to these institutions and pay those things. But however, if they have their logins information, it'll be really quick, because rather than you having to go in, and it's nothing wrong with that. I'll tell you how to have that durable power of attorney with the financial institutions. But if you already have that, they can just go in, pull up your stuff, pay your bill, boom, and then go ahead and take care of you. There are more things here that I'd like to fill in, but for the sake of time, I want today, but these are just a few things for you to notate. Next, who are your inheritance? Who are you leaving a legacy to? Think about your family. On the left-hand side here is myself, my husband, my 2 grandsons. Well, now actually, I got to update this picture because my daughter just had a 3rd son. So now the next one going to have my husband holding a baby with these 2. So we just had a third one. Okay. Now you see other people here with their families. Think about it. Who is your legacy? Who are you leaving it to? And you hear here, I have a shirt on that says "Build for your legacy." My grandsons have a shirt on that says "I am the legacy." Okay, that's my legacy. Let's talk a little bit about the Word of God, what it says. Now, you think of a will, you're thinking, does it talk about a will or things like that in the Bible? Let's look here. Hebrews 6:16 says, "For men verily swear by the greater, and an oath for confirmation is to them an end of all strife." See, the Bible talks about ending strife. You know, one thing that will start strife, and if you haven't never been through it, I can tell you, I know I've been through it, and you know, I'm sure most of us have been through it. When a person dies, it can be not pretty for family members. They can get a little ugly, okay? You know, and if you have things more in order, it will help tremendously. What is the purpose of taking an oath? An oath is a solemn promise, often invoking a divine witness regarding one's future action or behavior. This is the reason nearly all professions have oaths. They use these words as a binding contract to hold them accountable for their ethical actions, behaviors, and ultimately their decisions. You remember I told you earlier, there's a difference between a last will and testament and a living will. The last will and testament is exactly what it says. You are deceased and it is your last will and testament. It's the last thing you had to say. You should assign an executor or executrix of your will. You might say, what's the difference? Executor with the OR is a man, with the IX is a woman. That's the difference. I was executrix of the estate. You should choose one or two. You can have both. You can have executrix, but I'm gonna be honest. I would choose one and maybe have someone that you choose in case that person died prior to this. So if you had a executor sign and they died, then you might would turn around and do executrix and have them as somebody or somebody else. But you should choose one. It's actually easy. You got one person that you trust. What should you, who should you choose? Pick responsible people, parties. Pick somebody responsible. Only consider people in good financial standing. You might think, why would you want to do that? I'm being honest. If you choose somebody that don't have a lot of money and it's not good with their financial planning, guess what? And they're probably broke. They probably are not going to do very good at trying to be a good executive of the state and following through. Name at least one younger successor. That's what I was saying a moment ago. If you choose someone and that person died prematurely or whatever happened, because usually think about this way. If it's your last will and you've died, then you pretty much know that person is still living. But let's just say, you know, nowadays things happen. You know, what if those two people died together in a car accident? Then if they had someone other younger successor, then they could take over. And when I say younger, they don't have to be younger, but if the person you chose for executive of the state was your sister who is you're 92 and she's 82, then you might want to choose, she might want to choose her daughter who is, let's say 52 or something. That's just what I'm saying. That's what you need to make sure you're doing. Now, next is a living will. Let me tell you why I say there's a difference. You remember, I want to explain this in a living will. A living will is when you may get ill during that time. If you see here, it says a living will is a legal document that tells others what your personal choices are about end of life medical treatment. It lays out the procedures or medications you want or don't want to prolong your life if you can't talk with the doctor yourself. Okay, so let's just say something happens, like I said, God forbid a person did have a stroke. Well, when they did, if they have a living will, they might say, I do not want to be resuscitated. My dad had congestive heart failure. So my dad's heart, at times, we would have where the ambulance, the fluid would develop around his heart, and the ambulance would have to come to our house, take him to the hospital. One thing they would always ask, does he have a living will? Does he want to be resuscitated? Guess what? He had a living will, and he would say, I do not want to be resuscitated. I do not want to put on any kind of machines that, you know, that would, he don't want to be put on any type of machines that would try to keep him alive. Okay, so those are the things that you want to consider. So that's why a living will says, I'm living, but if I cannot take care of myself, this is what I want to be done. That's what a living will says. That's why it's called a living will. These are things I want to be done if I'm living, but I can't take care of myself right now at the moment. Please follow through with that. So it was so nice. Every time that the ambulance would come for my dad, I had the living will, and I could say, do not resuscitate if he was to go through that. What is a power of attorney? Power of attorney is a legal authorization that gives a designated person, term the agent or attorney, in fact, the power to act for another person, known as the principal. The agent may be given broad or limited authority to make decisions about the principal's property, finances, investment, or medical care. So the power of attorney can be limited to everything, or you can limit it to certain things. You do not have to give them limited authority. You can give them like, okay, I give the power of attorney over my, to pay my bills and my medical care, but they cannot do this, this, or that. You can do that. So, but a power of attorney gives a person that type of access. Now, let me explain the difference. There are two types. Durable power of attorney has to do with finances. When I had my power of attorney for my mom and dad, I could actually go to the bank, cash their checks, pay their bills. I can go in Duke Power. I can go in Piedmont Natural Gas. I could go anywhere and pay their bills. What I had to do is I had a document that looked similar to this one up here that was signed and notarized by them. And we had it notarized, verifying that signature. And I could take it to those financial institutions. They would file it so that even if I had to call in to Duke Power, I could call in, they would be able to pull it up, see that durable power of attorney and answer questions. The durable power of attorney is simply a way to allow to allow someone else to manage your finances in the event that you become incapacitated or unable to make those decisions yourselves. The power is granted in a document and is not only useful for you, but can really help your family in times of crisis. So I had the authority to handle my parents' finances as though it was them. I could take care of their bills. So if my dad would have to go to the hospital, my mom wanted to go with him, she did not have to worry about, oh my gosh, I got to go home and pay those bills. I already had them done. She didn't have to worry about it. Done, taken care of, because I had a power of attorney. Now you might say, what's a healthcare power of attorney? Well, like I told you, everything is trial and error. I learned the healthcare power of attorney because there was a time my mother was in the hospital. We were getting ready. I thought the durable power of attorney took care of everything. I was in the hospital. She was getting ready to have another type of operation. At the time she did, she was still kind of, a little out of it, woozy. So the lady looked at me and said, do you have a power of attorney? I said, oh yeah. So I handed her the durable one. She goes, no, you need a healthcare power of attorney. So I gasped and I looked at her and I said, really? She said, yeah. She said, but that's okay. We've got a document right here. She said, we can do it right here in the hospital. She grabbed two people that were sitting there waiting on family members as well to be witnesses. They signed off on it. The lady, they had a notary there. The notary watched them sign off on it. My mother just signed it some, I signed it, and boom. So from then on, I went, as soon as my mother got to the hospital, I did one for my dad. And you do have to do one individual. It can't be husband and wife together. It has to be an individual, one for the wife and one for the husband. I got a healthcare power of attorney. And guess what? I could go in now and make decisions on my parents' behalf health-wise. I could go to the doctor with my mom. If the doctor began to talk about her medications, I could say, hold on, which medication is this? What is that medication for? Is it necessary? They can provide me all the information regarding her medications because I had a healthcare power of attorney. Because of the HIPAA law, they would not do it and give you all that information if you don't have it. So no problem whatsoever. I had it. Let me tell you another thing that happened during this time with healthcare power of attorney, why it's so important. At the time we were doing different, like I said, with my parents, I took a lot of time taking care of them. One of the things happened with my mom was, actually, excuse me, it was my dad. My dad's heart, as I told you, was causing him a lot of problems. Well, one of the things that was happening is his kidneys began to shut down. Well, when it was, they were beginning to think about having him to be put on dialysis. And I remember my mom was so upset. She was so nervous. I said, Mom, you go in the other room. And they took her, my pastor was actually, I said, you go in there and you sit down with pastor and back in the room, and I'm going to go in here and finish talking to the doctors. Well, I knew I had a healthcare power of attorney. So I got with the doctor and I called him up to the side. I said, let me ask you something. My dad already has heart congestion and you're talking about dialysis. I said, doctor, be honest with me. I have a healthcare power of attorney. So I could say yes or no about this operation. I said, be honest. Do you think he's going to die if you're going to do that surgery? He said, there's a good possibility. I said, okay. I don't want it done. I'd rather just let him go and live. His heart is, slowly going down anyway. Don't do an operation that's not really necessary. In other words, you're pretty sure that he probably ain't gonna make it through that operation. It's 50-50, and it probably was higher stakes than that. So what I said, but let me do this first so that I can feel comfortable on what I feel like is a decision. I'm going to go ahead and try to convince my mom, but I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to sit down and let her talk to you. He said, I got you. So we went in the room with her and I said, Mom, they're saying Dad might need an operation. I said, but I'll let you talk to the doctor. So she looked at the doctor and she said, is he pretty weak? He said, yes. She said, so you're not for sure what might happen? He said, no, ma'am. She said, well, don't do it. Don't do the operation. So even though it was back in me, I still had really made that decision. But my heart said, at least let me see if I can get her to say no with me. So she did. So that just helped release me a little bit more like, okay. So went back in there. He didn't do it. I remember that was January, and my dad ended up living all the way up to April. So it prolonged him an additional 90 plus more days. Well, that's what a healthcare power of attorney can give you. Life insurance policies, so important, okay? Life insurance policies. A person, name your beneficiaries on your life insurance policy. Make sure you know who you're leaving that life insurance policy to. A person who derives advantage from something, especially a trust, will, or life insurance policy. That's what a beneficiary is. You should say if it's more than one person on that policy, are there going to be 100 share total? Share percentage totaling must equal 100%. In other words, if I got 2 people on there, is it 50-50? If I got 3 people on there, is it even? Is it going to be an even amount per person? You could even name on your life insurance policy, if somebody's 50% and 2 other people are 25 and 25, you can do that. However, you got to specify that. Also, on your life insurance policy, remember this. I talked about probate earlier. A life insurance policy is the one thing that avoids probate. Life insurance policies do not go through probate. I'm going to talk a few minutes about probate in just a moment, and I'm going to keep my time honest and make sure I'm on time. But probate is something that is not included in a life insurance policy. That's the wonderful things about life insurance policy. Everybody should have one. Life insurance policies should cover according to what you have that you know you need to A, pass on to an inheritance, or what you need to A, pay off. Let me give you an example. If you have a house and that house is paid in full, my parents' house was paid in full, their cars was paid in full, and their borough plots. If that's the case, then your life insurance policy is really going to be primarily an inheritance because they don't have anything to pay off. But if your house is not paid off, you got car loans, whatever, your life insurance policy should be enough, A, to cover those things in your death, as well as if you want to leave an inheritance. Quick example, say I got $50,000 worth of debt. My life insurance policy, but I want to leave my grandkids $50,000. Then you know you need 100 plus life insurance policy, 100,000 plus, okay? Because you want to, the first part of it needs to pay off your debt, because the debt don't go away because the person's deceased. The debt turns into the estate. That means the estate got a lien on it. So that's why you have to be careful with life insurance. Make sure you got adequate coverage. So you got to remember that. So A, make sure your life insurance policy is going to cover your debt as well as your inheritance. Now, another thing I want you to learn about life insurance policies. See, I put on here, protects the assets. How? If the deceased didn't have enough wealth to pay off any remaining debt, burial clause, and allows the heirs not to lose the estate. Life insurance should not be to cover the assets by living off the interest of the money and not the principal. The principal can be passed on as an inheritance. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. The younger you acquire the policy, the better. Okay, let me explain this. This is what I'm saying. If you have a $500,000 life insurance policy, you might think, oh, that's a lot. Yes, but this is what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to have enough coverage so that the person can live off the interest of the money and never touch the principal. So say you have a $500,000 life insurance policy. The person dies. Now you have enough money there that when you invest it, the interest of the money is going to continue giving you in their household every month. Say that person that died always had $3,000, what they brought in that house every month. The interest of that money is going to come out to exactly what you need, and that will be the $3,000 a month. You keep, so it's just like that person's living. You keep paying your bills until it's paid off, and you never touch the $500,000 principal because you're just living off of what interest you're making off the money. That's really how you're supposed to have life insurance policies. But most people don't do that, so they wait till they're older. And so I tell them, well, if you wait till you're older, that's okay. Do this. If you're younger, great. Let's get it done the right way. If not, that's okay. What we'll do is we'll get you where at least when you die, that you will have enough to pay off your debt and leave some to your inheritance. But that's what life insurance policies are supposed to do. Next. Okay. What you don't know can hurt you. Don't tell yourself it does not. Breakdown of the most common probate fees. Probate fees. Perhaps one of the biggest drawbacks to probate is the cost. And the more it costs, the less inheritance your beneficiaries will receive. Total cost can wildly vary depending on the number of factors, including the state you live in, the size of your estate, how complicated your estate is, and whether or not someone contests any part of your plan. But there are some things you can count on being fairly consistent in the probate process. Following are some of the most common fees that are likely to be incurred or at some point during probate, regardless of other circumstances. I'm going to talk about a few things in the probate steps. I'm right now going through this with my sister's estate. Let me tell you the difference. My parents had a will, my sister didn't. So that's what I'm telling you. I'm right now in this literally. So this is what's happening. Now, you see there are 8 steps here, but I will tell you this is not 8 days, okay? This is not 8 days. These are just 8 steps. So this can take up to a year, okay? First, 1, authenticate the last will and testament. The first thing they're going to ask you is, do this person have a will? If they have a will, great. You're going to present that will to the courthouse, okay? I will tell you this. The reason I told you to keep a will in your fireproof file cabinet is because according to what state you're in, but the state of North Carolina says you do not file a will until the person is deceased. So you need to keep a will in the fireproof file cabinet. Some states will let you go ahead and file the will in the court, so the document is present. But North Carolina does not. Now I know that from doing it. So you keep a copy of the will, then you take that will downtown to the courthouse. You present it. Next, they're going to see step 2. They're going to see if you appoint an executor or a personal representative as a lawyer. You might have a lawyer that handles that estate. That's fine. But it's going to be someone that's going to be, they're going to see who's handling this will. Next, they're going to identify and notify the creditors. They're going to find out if this person died and had debt, okay? They're going to go out and you have to actually publish in the newspaper this person's death for 30 days. They're going to see if any creditor is going to come back and say, I got a lien against that. This person never paid me for, and these are mostly unsecured debts, because guess why? The secured debts know you. You know why I say that? Your house is a mortgage, that's secure. Your car, that's secure. Why? They can foreclose on that house and they can repo that car. Unsecured debts, credit cards, some other personal loans, those things are really what you're notifying. But as well as the, don't get me wrong, the secure creditors know too, but they know they got a lien. So they're going to be identified and notifying the creditors. Step 4, they're going to determine the date of death of the values. So what they're going to be doing, they're going to be asking for the death certificates. When did this person die? Excuse me for one more, let me drink a little water. So they're going to be saying, when did this person die? So you're going to have the death certificates and those things as well. Then they're going to be locating the descendants' assets. What all did they own? They're going to have this long papers that you're going to fill out, and you're going to have to notate house, cars, you know, if they have houses, all that stuff has got to be documented. That's why they're going to be locating all the descendants' assets. Next, 6, paying the descendants' debts. As I told you, they're going to look at what kind of debts do they have. Did we have some creditors that reached out and says, you owe us? Because before those people that you got listed on their will, before they receive their money, this stuff is going to be paid off. That's why I said it's great to have enough coverage, life insurance, to handle your bills that you have so that those debts are paid off. Because if not, that's going to be done before anybody gets anything. Then they're going to be preparing and filing tax returns. That can be iffy. That's really not, it depends. I haven't had to do that so far on any of the estates I've handled. That can come more in place. Be honest, the more money the person has, the more values they have, the larger the estate in as far as money. Okay, that's where they might have to do more things with taxes and things of that nature. Like I said, I haven't had to do that so far. Okay. Next, the last step is distribute the estate. That's when the people, whomever are the heirs of the estate, will receive their inheritance. But you notice that's number 8. So all this other stuff is going to be done before we get to number 8. Now, if these things are done decent and in order, things are paid off, then it's not going to take us long to get to number 8. But this, and like I said earlier, this is not 8 days. This can be 8 months, and this could be a year. Because as a matter of fact, they're going to tell you it could be up to a year. All right, I'm finishing up for sake of time. Trust, let me tell you a little bit about a trust. A trust is a fund that's an independent legal entity that holds assets and property for the benefit of a people or organization. They often use in estate planning to hold money, investments, business, property, and other types of assets because it avoids probate. What I told you a moment ago about probate, one thing I told you earlier that avoids probate is a life insurance policy. They'll get that. But B, if it has to go, the person didn't have a will, that house and all that stuff is not going to go to you unless you go through probate or if you have trust. Now, you might say, what's a trust? A trust is right here, the little gentleman here, he's a grantor. That's probably you. You got a trust, you set it up. Now you assign a trustee. This is the person that's managing it. The majority of the time, the trustee is usually a lawyer, attorney. But in some cases, it could be a person that you know and trust that holds and manages the beneficiaries' information. And last is the beneficiaries, those who are going to receive stuff from that trust. Now, reason a lot of people do a trust is A, because it avoids probate, but B, also, you can be more specific as far as what you want your beneficiaries to do in a trust. Let me give you an example. If you send it to a grandchild, you might say, my grandson can have, prior to him turning 15 or 18, you can buy him a car at 18, as long as he has done, gone through school, graduated, going to college, those things. You can put things more specific. In a life insurance policy, you cannot, but in a trust, you can. You can determine more factors like that. You can say, as long as my son and daughter-in-law are still married, this is what I want them to have. You can specify more detailed information in a trust. That you can do. Now, the next question is, who needs a trust? Several people need a trust. I will tell you this. I will tell you, rule of thumb is for trust, if you have $100,000 or more to leave to someone, as well as real estates. When I say that, several homes. If you have more than one home and you have over $100,000 worth of assets, that's people who really need a trust. If you don't have that, it's not necessary, because a trust can be costly. Okay, to set up most trusts, you're going to at least spend about $3,500. So in that case, you got to make sure a trust is necessary for you. If you don't have that kind of heritage you're leaving aside, I wouldn't recommend a trust. I would say just do a will and have a life insurance policy. But if you have, like I said, if you got 3 homes and over $100,000, you should do a trust. Also, you might want to consider this as well. There are things that happen in life, and you might have a special needs child or a disabled parent or adult or whatever it may be, a loved one. There are trusts. What you have to be careful is the type of trust that you leave it to, because they have, usually if they're special needs or disabled, they're going to be receiving money from the state. In order for them not to lose their money and their benefits, you have to put it in what they call a special needs trust so that they do not lose their benefits. And that child will continue to be able to qualify for public assistance programs that would otherwise be unavailable to the child, especially the means tested programs that require the child to meet strict financial eligibility criteria. A special needs trust works because the assets held in the trust are available to the child, and these type of trusts must be discreet because they will specify the strict limits on the trust ability to give money to the child. In other words, if you left that child $100,000, they're not going to get that $100,000 that day. You might say every month, make sure this child has $300 that they need to buy this or that. Make sure they have the $1,000 every month. That's what this is going to say, so that the child would not lose their assets at all or any of their benefits, or the disabled person as well. It's still called the same thing, special needs trust. They will not lose any of their benefits. You can also assign who you want. So if that special needs child had a brother, a sibling that's taking care of them, you could put them over it. However, you specify in that trust how that person you put over it is to use their money. So that person over it cannot just throw their money away. They have to go specifically according to what that trust is documented. That's also for the disabled person, because a disabled person does not mean they can't think. They can just be somebody that can't, functionally get around. But because of that, you might have in there that this person, A, who takes care of them every day, make sure they're paid. So if you had a disabled person that had a caretaker, then you could have somebody, an attorney or someone over it, that knows they need to continue to pay the caretaker the money every month to take care of your disabled family member. So that's what happens there. Now, trust, as I said earlier, I did tell you a little bit, it's better to have a will or a trust. Here's a rule of thumb. If you have a net worth of at least 100,000 and have substantial amount of assets in real estate, or very specific instructions on how you want your estate to be distributed among your heirs after you die, then a trust could be for you. So you're looking at, like I said, you have more than one house and you have $100,000 or more in real estate assets and things of that nature. That's who a trust is for, because like I said, a trust can be costly to set up. Usually they start about $3,500. Now, questions. I don't know if anyone has any questions. See any questions out there? You see we good? All right. I hope I have provided you guys with extraordinary valuable information. Here is a little bit about myself. I am a proficiency coach. I tell you that my goal is to educate and equip grandparents to nurture healthy grandchildren and leaving a legacy of abundance and wealth. Please, please, please do this for me. I do have an email, as I stated earlier. My email is Gramps, Gramps, the number 4, growth, GROWTH, safe, SAFE @gmail.com. I am going to, there are a lot of other information that has been said today that was left off. This right here actually is a 3-day course. I'm going to open up an opportunity for people to be able to sign up for my 3-day course in July. That's going to open up in July. I will be giving at that time very, very detailed information, as well as I will have handouts for you to have. as well as I will give you assets to people that I also use to help educate you on your financial adventure so that you can carry out all your financial goals. I'm going to start these classes, like I said, in July. So if you email me at my email address and tell me that you're interested, I will send you a link that you will be able to sign up for my classes starting in July. And like I said, this is going to be a 3-day course, and it's going to be detailed because a lot of those documentations and things I told you that you need is a lot more to it than that. And I will be glad to go over that with you as well, starting in July with my 3-day course. So I hope that has helped out there. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Well, Renee, thank you so much for all that important and vital information. I mean, you know, that's something that we don't like to think about, that we should think about. You know, we shouldn't leave the stress, you know, on our loved ones, those that are left behind. You know, there's a lot that we should do. And most people don't like to talk about it because we think, you know, that something's going to happen. Well, it is going to happen sooner or later. So you might as well be prepared for it. So estate planning is something that we all should endeavor to have in place, to have our wishes expressed, to help prevent the unnecessary scenes that often take place when there's no directive in place. Love our loved ones enough to see that we don't burden them with the unnecessary costs. Their inheritance threatened, and they will incur ill behaviors that sometimes rip families apart. Let's try to avoid this by having a will, a trust, whatever it is that you need in place, have it there. But you know, as I was thinking about the last will, the living will, the trust, and all of this, I could not help but think about the eternal will. The eternal will is this. James 16:9-20 tells us, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in. Sure, we live here on earth, and we need to plan, and we need to get things in place. But there is an eternal life for you out there. And to make sure you get that right investment, you pick the right trust, trusting in him, so that you can live that eternal life. You know, I was thinking last night, I have not seen one person that died to take a house or a car, all that stuff with them. I haven't seen one person do it yet. So I say to you, make sure out of all those wills that you're going to get, you make sure you have that eternal will in place. That is the most important will of all. Your house, your cars, and your land and all that, you can leave it, bequeath it to your loved ones or whatever, because you cannot take it with you on the other side. All right. Thank you again, Renee, for all that expertise. And remember, you guys, take her, I hope you took her email down so that you can take part in this session. As she said, it's going to be 3 days, and we only had an hour here to share. So there's much, much more that she needs to share and would like to put out there for you. But before I close, let me say this. On July the 16th will be our last Destiny Colloquy for the summer. We will resume back in the month of October. But our topic next month will be get in tune with your crown. You know, there's so many people out there that are suffering silently with alopecia. So we're going to be talking about that next month. That's going to be our last Destiny Colloquy for the summer month. And we'll come back in November. In October, I'm sorry. Once again, thank you for all that important information, Renee. It has been so helpful. It has enlightened my mind, and I'm sure that it has meant so much to so many. I'm sure people that did not get to see it earlier will get to tune in later at some point and see it, because it will be both on Facebook and it's going to be on YouTube after this. Again, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the month of October. Have a great day and God bless.